The sky above the Indus Valley turned black at noon. Within hours, an entire civilization ceased to exist. Imagine standing in one of the most sophisticated cities ever built in the ancient world. The streets are laid out in perfect grids, the drainage system rivals modern engineering, and thousands of people go about their daily routines. Now imagine that within a single day, maybe even within minutes, every single person is gone, not fleeing, not fighting, just gone. Their bodies left where they fell, some still holding hands, others frozen mid-stride. This isn't fiction. This happened to Mohenjo-Daro, and what ended it wasn't an army, wasn't a flood, and wasn't anything we can fully explain. The ruins whisper of something that fell from the sky. For decades, archaeologists dismissed the strange vitrified stones scattered throughout the site, glass-like rocks that only form under temperatures exceeding 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. They ignored the skeletons with radiation levels 40 to 50 times higher than normal. They created comfortable narratives about gradual decline and climate change. But comfortable narratives don't explain why people in the streets of this ancient metropolis appear to have been flash-heated to extreme temperatures in an instant. They don't explain the layer of radioactive ash found across the ruins. And they certainly don't explain the ancient Sanskrit texts that describe weapons that sound disturbingly like nuclear blasts. Texts written thousands of years before we split our first atom. The Mahabharata speaks of a single projectile charged with all the power of the universe. An incandescent column of smoke and flame, bright as 10,000 suns, rose in all its splendor. It was an unknown weapon, an iron thunderbolt, a gigantic messenger of death which reduced to ashes the entire race. The bodies were so burned as to be unrecognizable. Those who survived lost their hair and nails. Pottery broke without apparent cause, and the birds turned white. These aren't the words of science fiction. They were written down millennia before Hiroshima. But Mohenjo-Daro wasn't alone in its sudden, inexplicable demise. Across the globe, separated by vast oceans and thousands of miles, other civilizations met similar fates during what can only be described as cosmic events. The Akkadian Empire once stretched across Mesopotamia, the world's first true empire, bringing together diverse peoples under a centralized government that administered cities, collected taxes, and maintained standing armies. For over a century, they thrived under the scorching sun of the Middle East. Then, around 2,200 years before the Common Era, something changed in the heavens. The empire didn't fall to invaders. It didn't collapse from internal strife. It simply emptied. Archaeological evidence shows that within a span of perhaps 3 years, the region experienced a climate catastrophe so severe that it transformed fertile plains into desert. But this wasn't gradual climate change. This was sudden, violent, and came from above. Core samples from the Gulf of Oman reveal a massive dust layer from precisely this period, containing minerals that don't belong to the local geology. The composition suggests an extraterrestrial impact or an aerial burst from a cosmic object, showering the region with enough debris to blot out the sun and end the rains for generations. Cities that had stood for centuries became ghost towns within a single generation. The people abandoned everything, leaving behind pottery, tools, even weapons in their desperate flight from a land that had suddenly turned hostile. The survivors carved warnings in clay. One tablet, discovered in the ruins of Tel Leilan, speaks of the anger of the gods manifesting as darkness over the land. Not nighttime darkness, something else, something that persisted day after day until crops failed and rivers dried and the social fabric of civilization tore apart. Half a world away, another empire was meeting a strikingly similar fate at almost the exact same moment in history. The Old Kingdom of Egypt, builders of the Great Pyramids, architects of monuments that still defy complete explanation, suddenly plunged into chaos. The Pyramid Age ended not with a whisper, but with a climate catastrophe that Egyptian records call the worst in human history. The Nile failed to flood for years. Famine gripped the land. But more disturbing than the famine are the texts that survived, speaking of the sky itself changing, of the sun being veiled, of stars falling to earth. One papyrus fragment describes fire falling from the heavens and the land being overturned in an instant. Another speaks of the river running dry as the mountains danced. These aren't poetic exaggerations. They're desperate attempts to describe something beyond the experience of the writers, something that had no precedent in human memory. Could a single cosmic event have triggered simultaneous collapses across multiple civilizations? The dating aligns too perfectly to ignore. Around the same time that Akkadian cities were being abandoned and Egyptian dynasties were crumbling, something caused global cooling, mega droughts, and widespread societal collapse across multiple continents. The usual suspects, volcanic eruptions or gradual climate shifts, don't fit the evidence. The dust composition is wrong, the suddenness is wrong, the geographic spread is wrong. Some researchers point to a comet airburst, similar to the Tunguska event of 1908, but exponentially larger. A cosmic object fragmenting in Earth's atmosphere, showering the planet with debris and triggering a cascade of environmental catastrophes. The fragments wouldn't need to create obvious craters. Air bursts generate heat intense enough to vitrify soil and flash vaporize water, while the atmospheric shockwave would be felt thousands of miles away. But if we're hunting for vanished civilizations destroyed by cosmic forces, we need to talk about what happened in the Amazon basin, where satellite imaging is revealing something extraordinary beneath the jungle canopy. Vast geometric structures, massive earthworks, and evidence of cities supporting populations that rival medieval London. These weren't primitive tribes. This was a sophisticated civilization with advanced agriculture, urban planning, and cultural complexity. Then, suddenly, it collapsed so completely that until recently, we didn't even know it existed. The timing? The same mysterious period when civilizations across the planet were experiencing catastrophic disruptions. Tree ring data from the Amazon shows a dramatic die-off of massive forest trees around 2200 BCE, followed by a chaotic period of regrowth. Something killed those ancient trees suddenly and simultaneously across vast areas. The indigenous myths speak of a time when the sky caught fire and the stars fell like rain, when the great rivers boiled and the forest itself burned, even though no lightning had struck. These aren't isolated myths. They're echoed in oral traditions from Australia to Africa, from Asia to the Americas. Cultures with no contact with each other telling essentially the same story about the same period in human history. The sky changed, fire fell, the world ended and then began again. Modern science is only now catching up to what ancient peoples witnessed and recorded. Ice core data shows multiple anomalous atmospheric events during this period. Cosmic dust signatures appear in geological layers worldwide. Chemical markers consistent with extraterrestrial hill impacts dot the archaeological record like breadcrumbs, leading back to a disaster we've only begun to understand. The question isn't whether cosmic events destroyed ancient civilizations. The evidence makes that clear. The question is what exactly happened, and more disturbingly, could it happen again? We orbit through space on a planet flying through a cosmic shooting gallery at 67,000 miles per hour. Every day, tons of space debris rain down on Earth, most burning up harmlessly in our atmosphere. But not always harmlessly, not always small. The asteroid that ended the dinosaurs was just one object in an endless stream of cosmic wanderers crossing Earth's path through the solar system. The comets we see are the beautiful ones, the ones that miss. We don't see the ones that don't miss until they arrive, and depending on their composition and trajectory, we might not see them at all until impact is unavoidable. The civilizations of Mohenjo-Daro, Akkadia, the Old Kingdom of Egypt, and countless others we're only now discovering didn't have satellites or telescopes or early warning systems. They looked up and saw gods and omens. They watched the sky with religious devotion because the sky held power over life and death in ways they understood viscerally. When something came from above, they had no defense, no explanation, only the raw experience of watching their world end in fire and darkness. We've built our modern civilization on the assumption of stability, the belief that tomorrow will look essentially like today. We've forgotten what our ancestors knew with terrible certainty. The cosmos is not empty, and it is not safe, and it has ended civilizations before. The next question should terrify you. When was the last major cosmic event that significantly affected human civilization? The answer is more recent than you think. In the year 535, the sky darkened across the entire planet for 18 months. Temperatures plummeted, Crops failed. The Byzantine Empire nearly collapsed. China recorded a year without summer. Trees from California to Siberia show freeze damage in their rings. Half the world's population may have died in the famines and plagues that followed. The cause? Still debated, but evidence points increasingly toward a cosmic impact or airburst, possibly multiple fragments from a disintegrating comet. That was less than 1,500 years ago, a blink of an eye in cosmic terms. We scan the skies now with technology our ancestors couldn't imagine, cataloging asteroids and tracking comets, building mathematical models of impact probabilities. But the universe is vast and full of dark objects traveling at speeds that turn ice and rock into weapons of apocalyptic power. We've identified perhaps 90% of the largest near-Earth asteroids. Perhaps 90%. And that says nothing about rogue comets from the outer solar system, about dark objects we've never seen, about the fragments and debris streams our planet passes through year after year. The ancient civilizations that vanished didn't see it coming either, until they did, and by then, it was already too late.